Good morning, everyone. Okay, good morning, everyone, and welcome to our webinar, The Celtic Interconnector Story. I'm Mary Honohan, tax partner at PwC, council member of the France-Ireland Chamber of Commerce, chairperson of this working group, Climate Response La Vie en Vert, and I'm your moderator today. The Celtic Interconnector is a 700 megawatt high voltage direct current 575 kilometres submarine power cable linking the south coast of Ireland to the northwest coast of France, so Cork to Brittany. The agreements were signed in Paris on the 25th of November last year and were noted as a landmark moment in bilateral relations between Ireland and France, marking sustainable energy as a major area of collaboration in the future. The project was developed by EirGrid and RTE France and is expected to be built and operational by 2026. It will be able to import and export enough electricity to power 450,000 homes. So today I'm looking forward to hearing about the Celtic Interconnector from Shane Cooney of EirGrid. And Shane Cooney is Onshore Project Manager with EirGrid for the Celtic Interconnector. Shane studied chemical and process engineering at Munster Technological University and has over 20 years experience in the power and pharma sectors, delivering large-scale capital projects both in Ireland and internationally. I'd like to welcome Shane. The format is Shane will speak for about 30 minutes and we will then have a Q&A session. So feel free to put your questions in the chat as we go along or wait until the end when I'll open it up for Q&A. So I'll start now with my first question. And my first question, Shane, is, can you tell us who EirGrid are and why you're building this interconnector?
So EirGrid are the state-owned operators of Ireland's electricity transmission grid. So we send power from where it's generated to where it's needed. And we also operate the wholesale electricity market, which is where generators of electricity sell their electricity into the wholesale market, which is sold on to the electricity supply companies, which is who sell it on to the consumers. So our job is to operate this transmission system, but also to plan the future needs of the electricity system. It's important to note we don't actually generate any electricity. So EirGrid only transports electricity from point to point. And actually we transport it at the bulk level, so in the high voltage transmission system. So one way of looking at it is like EirGrid are like the operators of the motorways, transporting the bulk electricity from where it's generated to the urban centres where it's needed. And then ESB networks operate the distribution system, where the electricity is distributed more at the local level, right down to your actual house. And we also operate electricity interconnectors to other countries. So currently we just have interconnectors across to the UK, but the Celtic Interconnector project will be our first interconnector connecting us to the European Union, actually.
So you're the facilitator then of the transport of the energy.
Yes, we're the facilitator, and we also we plan what the future needs of the system are going to be. So that's you know, what's the future mix of generation that we need, and what's the future demand on the system going to be from, you know, the likes of industry and just general population. And so we have a long-term plan which is shaping our electricity future. And this is, you know, we have been set goals by the government to achieve in 2030 that 80% of the electricity that we use in Ireland will come from renewable sources. So just to put that into context, currently, right now, about 40% of our electricity that we use, on let's say on an annual basis, is coming from renewable sources. So what we're looking to do over the next, 7 years to 2030 is actually double the amount of renewable electricity that we will be using on the system. And further forward, our long-term goal by 2050 is a zero carbon future, so that actually we're 100% renewable and moving away from fossil sources. But that's a bit of a way off.
Yeah, absolutely. So you have a partner, Shane, who's delivering the project on the French side, and why are the French interested in interconnecting with Ireland?
So our joint venture partner is RTE, who are the French equivalent of EirGrid. So RTE own and operate the transmission system in France. They actually already have a significant amount of interconnection already to their nearest neighbours, the likes of Germany, Spain, Switzerland. So they are always looking for improving their interconnection with other European countries, giving them access to to different markets. So this project is quite complementary to both Ireland and France. So our French partners are have as many benefits, let's say, of this project as we do. So the guiding principle really for this project is it has been declared as a project of common interest by the EU, meaning that it satisfies some kind of key criteria, being interconnection with other European Union countries. The European Union actually has a target that each member state should have at least 10 to 15% interconnection of their grid with other European countries. Now, obviously, at the moment, Ireland, following Brexit, has 0% interconnection with its European partners. There's also a project of common interest, is a project which has economic benefit for the member states. So ultimately, actually, the interconnector will actually drive down the prices of electricity for consumers, because it's connecting two different wholesale electricity markets, meaning that when there's a price differential between two member states in terms of electricity, the energy can flow in the cheaper direction. So that's of great benefit to consumers. But then lastly, the main impact of a project of common interest designation is that a project such as this goes towards the member states achieving their climate ambitions. So for Ireland, it means that we can develop more renewables because we have an outlet for selling these renewables, exporting them when we have excess renewable generation in Ireland. But that also the interconnection offers us the backup to back up those renewables when the wind isn't blowing as strong as it normally does. And likewise for France, this is giving them access to what is believed to be a future really renewables hub in Ireland, with our ambitions for the amount of renewable generation that we are going to add to our grid.
So there's a lot of really good benefits for Ireland from this initiative, which is fantastic. So cost is always interesting. I understand the project is going to cost 1.6 billion. Can you tell us where this money is coming from, and are the Irish taxpayer funding it?
Yes, the budget for this project is 1.6 billion. As a project of common interest, we have secured EU grant funding of over 500 million for this project. The rest of the funding for the project is coming by funding from lenders. on the EirGrid side, and on the RTA side as well, they will finance their portion of the project, which, aside from the grant, is split 65% funded by Ireland, 35% funded by France. And that's a division of cost based on the split of economic benefit or benefit of the project to both member states. So no, it's not being funded by taxpayers. Ultimately, the revenues from this project, from the transfer of electricity either from Ireland to France or from France to Ireland, will fund this. And the economic model of it is that ultimately this will actually be of benefit to Irish and French consumers of electricity price-wise. I suppose the simplest way of looking at it is, when there is a price differential between Ireland and France, the respective market would have access to the cheaper electricity. Also, in terms of climate ambitions, the relevant Ireland or France would have access to the lower carbon source of electricity. So be that, France accessing Ireland's renewables, or Ireland accessing France's zero carbon nuclear energy instead of firing up an old gas plant in Ireland. So ultimately this project is just very beneficial on many levels.
It's sounding like that, and it's going to help us. You mentioned earlier 2030 and 2050. It's going to significantly help us in those directions. Which reminds me to ask you, does this project help you with our climate ambitions?
Yeah, so actually the transmission system in Ireland is actually really best in class at the moment in the world at its capability of dealing with renewables on the transmission system. So by their nature, renewable electricity is intermittent. In terms of wind, you're at the mercy of the weather, whether the wind is blowing or not blowing. In terms of solar electricity, which there's many plans for increasing solar farms in Ireland. That's a daytime activity, obviously. And obviously seasonal as well, depending on again on the weather. So at the moment, Ireland can deal with 75% of renewables on the grid, which is quite a high level to be actually able to achieve. But in order to achieve our 2030 ambitions of having 80% of all of our electricity coming from renewable sources, we actually need to be able to cope with, at any one moment in time, 95% of renewables on the grid. Because as you can imagine, it averages out over the year. Sometimes you won't have as many renewables as others. But on the days when we have, good wind, actually we end up having to curtail some of that wind generation. So we just, we produce more renewable electricity than we can actually use on that day on the grid. And storage of electricity, is always a problem. We don't have the capability on the grid to store the amount of renewable energy, excess renewable energy that we produce on let's call them good days. So interconnection allows us to, instead of curtailing that wind generation, it allows us to export that power to France, who will use the power. So this is twofold, really, because obviously we're getting the revenues as well from being able to export this power instead of just not having it or switching it off. But it makes the economic investment model for the likes of renewable power developers much more attractive as well, because it's giving them a wider market for their renewable power. So in many ways, Celtic Interconnector is step one. We're going to need more interconnectors to really continue to work towards our net zero 2050 long-term target.
Very good. Well, let's get the first one going. How long does it take to deliver a project like this, Shane?
So from where we are right now, so we have signed EPC contracts with the cable supplier Nexans and a converter station supplier Siemens to deliver this project. So I suppose we have a definite timeline now for delivery, that we have achieved funding, achieved all planning consents, and signed contracts for design, manufacturing, construction, commissioning of this project. But there has been many years really to get to this point. So actually the Celtic Interconnector was really initially conceived as a project way back in 2009. In 2013, it appeared for the first time on the list of projects of common interest on the PCI list in the EU. In 2017, we were already engaging with communities in terms of route options for where the Celtic Interconnector could make landfall, and where the cable could be directed to connect to the grid. So there was a long process of engagement and planning leading up to submittal of planning applications, foreshore license application, both in Ireland and in France in 2021. That's a long process in terms of then up to 12 months later getting actual decisions on those consents. So that was 2022, getting to the position of being able to actually sign contracts was following almost a longer period that it will now take to actually build the Celtic Interconnector. But I suppose that long period of planning and engagement with communities in order to submit the planning applications does save time in the long run, in that actually the planning application for Celtic didn't have any oral hearings, had quite a low number of public submissions, and was ultimately granted permission.
So it sounds like you were lucky then, because planning takes pages and pages of media from time to time. But it sounds like it wasn't too difficult for you to get the planning in comparison with other projects that we read about in the media.
I think EirGrid has learned from its past, and I wouldn't say it's luck. As in, we have quite a well thought out methodology of preparing these projects, which allow a significant amount of time to actually optioneer, present options to local communities, stakeholders, involve them in the decision making process, so that ultimately what the project that actually goes to planning is one that has been discussed, people's views taken on board, and, as we call it, the best performing option selected. So we don't start out with the current route that the Celtic Interconnector is taking from France to Ireland. There were multiple different options for where it would actually make landfall. Where it is actually making landfall now is at Youghal Beach, but there were a good few other options on that. And there were also various different route options and decisions made prior to planning being submitted, talking with local communities about, for example, where the converter station could be located. In Ireland, there were about 14 different locations on the table for that. So ultimately, again, best performing option was selected. So I think our experience of planning is that, the time needs to be put in involving people in the decisions being made before the planning is submitted, so that what is actually submitted is something that the majority are going to accept.
Okay, so it sounds like you have a very good blueprint for bringing people along and engaging with local communities when it comes to getting the planning permission. And I think you said it'll come onshore in Youghal, County Cork. And what does this connector look like? Like, will you be able to see it from the town, or is it a small building?
So when it's all built, the only thing that you will be able to actually see is the converter station, which is a kind of a factory-sized building, let's say. That's being located on an industrial site in Carrigtwohill. The actual cable making landfall in Youghal is underground. It goes underground the whole way from Youghal, following mostly the roads network, to Carrigtwohill, to the converter station site, and then from there it goes underground again up to Knockraha substation, which is a large transmission system substation about 10 kilometers north of Carrigtwohill, which is where it actually connects to the grid and is further, the power further distributed or collected from there. So actually the cable itself, once it's in place, won't be able to see it again. It's all underground. And particularly at the beach, that was, we've already built one of these interconnectors, the east-west interconnector, which comes in at Lusk Beach, but again, people wouldn't be aware of it there because it's underground.
Yeah, no, that's good to hear. I'm from Cork, so is Shane, so I can kind of visualize all these places he's talking about. And yes, it sounds like you're not going to be able to see anything. It's interesting for us to hear, but it sounds like if you went down to see, you wouldn't see anything. So another question for you, Shane, who is driving the need for the project?
So I think the drive for this project really, well, I mean, we conceived the project originally way back, as I said, in 2009, and seeing the need for this, but with our French partners, with RTE, there is as much of a drive really to get this project done, and it is all around our climate ambitions. The EU designating it as a project of common interest, was a key driver in pushing this project forward and securing, the remainder of the funding that was required for this project. As I said, the EU have targets for member states to have interconnection. We have 0% with the EU at the moment, and I think, in light of the war in Ukraine, at the moment, I think security of supply of energy has just come so into focus now in the last year as to how important it is. And the Celtic Interconnector actually really strengthens that security of supply. Ireland is able to rely on energy transfer from France. Likewise, France can rely on energy transfer from Ireland when it's required.
Very good. I think we touched on this a little bit a few minutes ago, but what is the interconnector? What does it look like, and what does it consist of? You mentioned the factory in Carrigtwohill, but can you give us what does the cable look like?
It's a high voltage direct current connection, so a HVDC. So our transmission system is an AC system. It's alternating current. But direct current is the most efficient way of transporting electricity over long distances. So whenever you transport electricity, there are losses associated with that. So the further you transport it, the more energy you lose. And HVDC is the most efficient way of that transfer. So what that means is that at either end in Ireland and France, you need what's called a converter station. to be able to convert that DC electricity back into AC electricity so that it can connect to the respective grid. And I suppose the easiest way of thinking of it is if you think of your laptop charger or your mobile phone charger, the little, you know, kind of semiconductor element in the plug, or the little brick that is attached to your laptop charger, you know, that is actually converting, you know, AC electricity from the wall socket into DC electricity, which you use to charge the battery of your laptop. So a converter station is actually one of those, really, at, you know, a giant scale. So we have a converter station in Ireland. We have a converter station in France. It's more or less an identical converter station, and Siemens will build both of those converter stations for Ireland, and in Ireland and France. And then DC power is, for our interconnector, is transported via two cables. So we'll actually have two cables connecting the converter station in Ireland to the converter station in France. And then AC power is transported in three cables. So we'll have three cables connecting each converter station to the grid on either side.
Very good. And you mentioned a few times that power goes in each direction. Will we be importing nuclear energy from France?
So we would import whatever is the fuel mix, you know, in France at that moment in time. So in terms of the overall future, I suppose, benefit of the project, it's probably likely that most of the time, the majority of the time, actually, power would be transferring in the direction Ireland to France in terms of, you know, selling our excess renewable energy. But obviously, in times of low wind in Ireland, when, you know, we end up having to, let's say, move down, we call it the merit order of plants, or move down the carbon chain of using maybe more and more fossil-fired plants in order to supplement the power. In those situations, we would be likely importing, taking the opportunity to import power from France, which, you know, would have a nuclear mix. You know, also, I suppose, France is heavily interconnected to Spain as well, which has quite a high amount of solar. France itself is developing a lot of solar. So, you know, all in all, we'd be looking at that kind of low carbon mix power from France that we would be importing.
Very good. And continuing with nuclear, did you think about building a nuclear plant instead?
So EirGrid's kind of remit as the state transmission system operator, you know, is just in the transport of electricity. So our remit only goes as far as planning the future transmission system and building interconnectors. But in terms of you know, building nuclear generators, EirGrid doesn't generate electricity, so we don't develop projects such as that.
Very good. Looking at time here, I see we've a few questions on the chat, and I'll take the first one first, Shane. It says, what is the major challenge for Shane as an onshore project manager of the Celtic Interconnector? Maybe you could give us a little flavour for the stresses of your day and the project.
So, I mean, the major challenges change as the project goes towards the phases, yeah. Maybe my major challenge, I more call it my major goal, really, or target all the time, is to really, you know, bring stakeholders along on the journey with us on this project, and, you know, make sure that the project is, you know, as least impact as possible, you know, on the local communities, local stakeholders. that can be a challenge in terms of actual works taking place, or explaining to people why a certain route option is chosen as the best option. But on the flip side, it's always good to be able to explain the benefits of this project. And actually, at a local level, there's a community benefit fund has been set up for communities which are located along the route of the Celtic Interconnector. So community groups will be able to apply for community benefit projects to be funded from a 2.4 million euro community benefit fund. So something like that is great to see, to be able to pass on to the local communities that are probably bearing, let's say, the most burden of the the impacts or the short-term disturbances of this project being developed, which is of national importance.
So things that something like a child's playground or some boardwalk, or I live in Dublin, and the incinerator is very near me, and they developed a fund. It sounds similar to what you're talking about, or yours sounds similar to what that is, as in you can apply for local communities, and local organizations can apply for whatever is relevant to their organization.
Yeah, and I mean, this is probably one big upside of this the whole renewables future and targets, is that for renewable projects, they all have to show a community, a local community benefit for and provide local community benefit funds for where they are located. So this, over the next decade, is actually going to be really a huge source of funding for local communities to develop and see. Obviously we're getting the benefits on a national scale from these renewable projects, but it really will be, I think, a big source of funding for, well, predominantly rural Ireland, really.
Very good. There's another question here on supply chain. What opportunities are there for supply chain companies? Have any thoughts on this?
Yeah, so from Irish, from the works that will be carried out in Ireland, so we've entered into contracts with Siemens as basically one of the international suppliers of this converter station technology, and Nexans, who are a French cable company, and they will provide the supply and install the cable. But they will engage contractors to carry out the civil, mechanical, electrical construction of these projects. So we do see that there will be likely these works will be significantly done by Irish contractors. So actually the cable, while being supplied by Nexans from a factory in Norway and Belgium, the actual installation in the ground will be done by an Irish contractor as a subcontractor of Nexans. So the construction of this project definitely is an opportunity for Irish supply chain companies. Long term, obviously, the enduring effect of the Celtic Interconnector would be, the facilitation really of further renewables projects. So, which would also obviously be on a wider level an opportunity for Irish supply chain companies.
Very good. Just to remind everybody, if you have any question, feel free to type it into the chat. We still have time for a few more questions, so I'll ask you a question while I'm waiting for other questions. You've touched on Siemens already, but who is actually building the interconnector? Siemens is providing equipment, as I understand it. Is there a construction company? Is it are we managing the construction, or is there a project team between the joint venture, or how is it going to how is it going to work?
So no, Siemens actually have a contract for design, supply, and construction and commissioning of the project. So Siemens will manage the overall construction of the converter station, and they will engage as a subcontractor. They will engage, for the likes of, well, first and foremost, a civil contractor in terms of the building, and they will engage mechanical, electrical contractors. So, but Siemens, we're in an EPC contract arrangement with Siemens and Nexans. So that means that they will engineer, procure, and construct the projects. It's split into a cable project and a converter station project, and EirGrid will be managing really the managing those contracts, but also managing then the interface between the cable contract and the converter station contract and the connection to the grid. Very good,
very good. We touched on, I think you gave us the answer to this already, but I'm wondering why not with the UK? Is it simply because they're not in the EU anymore? You mentioned the need to generate some from an EU country, which obviously we don't have at the moment. Is that just the reason, or is there another reason?
No, so we currently operate interconnectors to the UK, and there's another interconnector in development, in construction at the moment, connecting Wexford to Wales. That's the Greenlink interconnector. That's being developed by a private developer. Ultimately, probably in terms of project of common interest designation and the EU targets, we would be pursuing interconnection to the European Union and gaining access to those European markets. But there, are still definitely benefits of interconnection to the UK also. But look, it's probably one probably difference between interconnection between the UK and interconnection with France is that in times when we are, short of power, or we have particularly in the evening peak between 5 o'clock in the evening and 7 o'clock in the evening, Monday to Friday, when we have the greatest demand for electricity, that coincides exactly. We're in the same time zone as the UK. They have the exact same, requirements as us. In terms of connection with France, even the simple fact that they're an hour offset from us, makes a big difference in when their greatest demands are versus our greatest demands are. That hour difference can make a huge difference in terms of, being able to export power to us or not.
Yeah, I can imagine. And you mentioned the private developer down in Wexford. At the end of their project, presumably they need then to apply to connect to EirGrid. Would that be right? Or is it to the ESB they need to apply to connect with?
No, they would have their authorizations in place already to have a connection to the grid, and also from the CRU, the Commission for Regulation of Utilities in Ireland. They would have given them an authorization to actually construct an interconnector as well. And so that will be based on that there is a benefit, there is a need and a use for it.
Very good. Okay. Well, Shane, this has been really interesting. It's a last call for questions, and we have a question. I was just going to say, if I have no more questions, I'm going to leave Shane off the hook, but actually I have one more question here. Will EirGrid work with Siemens to arrange some supply chain events to ensure the Irish supply chain is used?
Siemens are already working on other projects in Ireland. So actually Siemens are constructing the Greenlink interconnector that I mentioned in Wexford, and they have just finished a large project of a synchronous condenser down in Moneypoint. So, you know, Siemens Ireland are managing this project and have a well-established Irish supply chain in Ireland. But it's, you know, it's something certainly that we will be encouraging, let's say, in terms of use of the Irish supply chain. But I do expect that that will be significantly the case.
There's a long question here from Owen Sweeney. Can you read that, Shane, and see what answer you can give to him?
So Owen is rightly pointing out that the Celtic Interconnector at 700 megawatts will then become the largest single in-feed to the Irish system, up from 500 megawatts, which is from the East-West Interconnector. So the 700 megawatts figure was selected as actually what could be tolerated at the moment as the largest single in-feed into the system. You know, so hence that is actually the size of the Celtic Interconnector that has been used. So the interconnector itself will obviously have frequency response services, but you know, the project and the technical parameters of the project were developed to take into account what the grid could actually tolerate. So that, you know, that is all in place in order to ensure that such a large in-feed can be connected to the grid.
Very good. And then there's another question. Is this the first interconnector cable running from Ireland? I think you've answered that already, but
yeah. So we have the East-West Interconnector. There's also the Moyle Interconnector in the north, and the Greenlink Interconnector will be online before the Celtic Interconnector is online as well. So, but I think we'll certainly see more again in the future.
Very good, thank you, Shane. Unless there are any other questions, I think it just remains for me to thank Shane for giving us his time this morning. It was a really interesting story to hear the kind of the minuity of the project. It always brings it to life to know exactly where it's going to take place and when. So I'd like to thank Shane for giving us very informative answers to our questions. And I'd like to thank everybody else for joining in and staying with us. So hope to see you for the next webinar and enjoy the rest of the day. Thank you.
Thank you, Mary.